So after last week being pretty impressed by the princess and how even though Wayne coming in and kind of saving the day, or at the very least assuming he would, that was nice, that was amazing. To get a character who's been more in the sidelines kind of being promoted as you can tell she is her brother's sister, right? There is still that level of cunningness and being able to out-navigate your opponent even when things unexpectedly happen. And given she doesn't have really a lot of experience in that field, the fact that she was able to kind of postpone a marriage that would have ended in her death more than likely was pretty damn spectacular. And then to have this episode have her kind of interest in the people's court, the debate hall, right? The fact that that wasn't a one-off thing. I actually saw some people last week being like, hey, I wonder if that will be something that she'll take influence from and maybe bring to her own kingdom, because it's something that clearly she's interested in. And I thought that was a really great idea. And to see how that was actually used as something important in this episode. Originally, they just thought she was making fun of them or just basically was just kind of putting on a show. But the fact that she continued to go there day after day, and the fact that they ultimately were able to do this amazing checkmate maneuver where instead of having maybe a few hundred, maybe a few thousand people flee the kingdom in the attempts of an invasion, and then you take in the stragglers, the fact that all 30,000 or so civilians march towards the enemy and they can't provide enough aid for all that basically foils their plan unless they want to slaughter innocent people, then in return probably make themselves out to be the enemy of the world. That's a pretty big brain play, and the fact that it was brother and sister working together to have that happen, it brought a smile to my face, man. I really enjoyed that. But the poison attempt was an interesting one, right? Because this episode kicks off in a pretty unexpected way, in my opinion, because even though I knew Wayne was there just unexpectedly, he didn't know that there was marriage talks going on. I knew that was going to be a misunderstanding, but the fact that he actually went along with it, being like, that's actually a great idea, and the fact I'll marry Loa as well, and oh wait, we have a custom, we can't have two people marry from the same family like this, let's come back tomorrow and let's talk about this. As, you know, the eldest prince here is just shitting his pants, being like, what in the actual hell, why is he accepting it? I was hoping he would deny it and then I could point out Natra's flaws and this and that. No, and the fact that they were able to out-navigate a situation that really should have ended in someone guaranteed getting married to someone else, and honestly I thought maybe that would just happen to our boy and then in return Loa would get what she wanted. But the fact that they actually ended up doing a poison attempt with a different prince, like, out of all the characters that we met, I was like, okay, the person who's talking about marrying this little girl so he can beat her just to prove a point to the brother, that's who's going to try to poison Wayne. And the fact that it wasn't, I thought was very interesting. And the fact that he immediately clued in, not that they didn't go like overboard. They didn't say, oh, he has a keen sense of smell. He can smell poison a mile away. No, there was just something off about the person delivering the tea. And if we've seen anything from Wayne is that he's a people person reader. He can acknowledge when things are awry. And the fact that he's like, drink it. And she's like, no, I can't drink it. And then of all the people to do it, I love how the prince was the one who drank it. And in that moment, I was like, please don't let him die, because we know how this is going to look. It's going to be Wayne who's going to get punished. And the fact that he just barely survived, and the fact that he was held for over a week, pretty damn insane to then see how it escalates into basically a takeover. And honestly, this show's wild. It can go from having just people talking about getting married to launching an all-out war when a poison attempt is made. And it would have been interesting to see, because if this man was able to just barely survive with medical attention, I'm curious to see what it would look like for Wayne. Like, I don't know, we don't really know a lot about his, like, physical background, right? I'm curious to see, would it have done worse, the same, a little weaker in terms of hurting his body? It's something interesting to think about, but I'm glad he wasn't the one to swallow the poison, though he did come pretty damn close, all things considered. I mean, had he been distracted, had he not looked at the woman delivering him the tea, he very well could have took a drink. But then again, maybe he is kind of like acquired to a taste, so maybe by the time it touched his lips, he would have realized. I mean, it's hard to say, but still, this episode was absolutely bonkers in the best possible way. We have a few more episodes to go before the show wraps up, and they basically are ending it in a kind of situation where it feels like we're going to announce who's probably going to become ruler. And the idea of pretty much like, this is really right now just all for show. The people who decide who's going to become the rulers are going to be the siblings. It's more about just getting general support, so when you do become ruler, you're not going to be overthrown or anything like that. But it's interesting to see how It feels like if you were to place money, Loa becoming the ruler seems like the natural plot progression. But at the same time, I could almost see them letting one of the brothers rule for a time, that causing a sort of conflict for an arc or two before he ultimately gets killed and then maybe she ascends the throne. But either way, they're setting up something interesting for next week, and it has me very excited because I feel like it can't just simply end there with 30,000 people marching towards them. There's got to be something else, and after an already poison attempt, I mean, he's going to be on his guard, but it was very interesting to see him actually get knocked out from exhaustion, because as we know from Wayne's character, the whole point of the Genius Prince is that he wants to have a leisurely life without being basically tossed to the curb because his people revolt against him. And the fact that he's been overworking himself to the point of like exhaustion and passing out and basically honestly making Nim the most worried we've seen from her character. She was crying. She acted like a little girl in that moment, and that's usually the person who kind of keeps Wayne up and right and not falling over and not being a goofball. And to see him in that vulnerable state, and to kind of see them both in that vulnerable state, it was a nice moment to remind us how much they once again care about each other, but the fact that even though they seemingly win most situations or they out-navigate most people, they are human, and exhaustion could kill him. He could have fallen over. He could have fallen off a wall and killed himself. The fact that he was that tired meant that he very well could have drank that poison, which he normally wouldn't. And that's what makes it interesting, is that there are these human elements surrounded by a character who you think will never lose, but actually has multiple defeats over the course of this anime, just in smaller ways than what you typically associate with a defeat. And I mean, one of the things that really helps make this show pop is that it's not just simply like, oh, look at this intelligent prince, he's going to out-navigate everyone, and then that's our entire gimmick. The fact that they make the world as interesting, at least in my opinion, I'm sure most people won't agree with that, they'll say, no, Wayne's the most entertaining part, but when you look at the civilian assembly, right, and the stuff they're talking about, last week with aqueducts, this week, just like the idea of taxes and how they go about things, the way that they're actually using real concepts about how governments and cities operate, and just the idea of revolutionary technologies and how so many people are scared of change, so they want to allocate that money for something that they know will work, not something that, even though in a modern setting, we know aqueducts are something that they should have. It's really cool to see how that wasn't just a simple side remark for the political junkies and the history junkies. Rather, it was also there to serve as a plot-relevant aspect to this episode, and have them, because she continued to pop up there, actually lead the charge and march 30,000 people, not armed, not dangerous, but fleeing and wanting salvation and harbor. That's what's really cool about this show, is that it has that general anime excitement I think a lot of people like, with its comedy, with its kind of what the hell moments, didn't see that one coming. But then it also, when you strip it down to basically its birthday suit, it's kind of really well written with its history, the mechanics, and how the people feel like a real culture for a time period such as this one. Thoughts and feelings, if you have any, on this episode. Very, very solid. I mean, I loved last week just kind of getting more on the sister. It was great to kind of have that carry on into this episode, even with Wayne popping back up. But I mean, this is great. They really are setting themselves up for an explosive finale. But thoughts, if you have any, leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new around here. Till next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.